I stand at the pulpit of First Baptist Church, my weathered hands trembling as they grip the wooden edges. The faces before me blur through my tears, some skeptical, some hopeful, some just curious about the racist farmer who claims to have died and met Jesus. My throat tightens as I begin to speak. 40 days, I say, my voice cracking. 40 days I lay between life and death. But what I saw, what he showed me, I paused, catching sight of my son Ben in his pastor's collar, nodding encouragingly from the front row. Next to him sits Sarah, my pregnant daughter, her hand protectively over her swollen belly. And there in the back, barely visible but unmistakable, is Linda, my ex-wife, the woman I drove away with my bitterness, now fighting her own battle with cancer that few know about. I was a man filled with hatred, I continue, a man who lost his youngest daughter, Grace, and blamed God, blamed everyone who didn't look like me, think like me. I turned my back on love itself. Suddenly, the fluorescent lights of the church fade away, and I'm back there in that moment between worlds. The searing pain in my chest as I collapsed in the field. The soft dirt beneath my fingers. The summer sun beating down as my vision darkened. Then, that light. Not the harsh glare of the sun, but something softer, warmer, more alive than anything I'd ever known. I see his face again, not as others paint him, but real, overwhelming in its love and sorrow. His eyes pierce through every layer of hatred I'd built around my heart. "Elliot," he says, and my name and his voice shatters me completely. "My child, why have you carried this burden for so long?" Behind me, someone drops a hymnal, snapping me back to the present. I grip the pulpit tighter, scanning the congregation. In the third row, I spot little Tommy, the 8-year-old black boy, who keeps calling me Grandpa despite my past cruelty. He waves, and something catches in my chest. Brothers and sisters. I say, wiping my eyes, I'm not here because I'm special. I'm here because even the hardest heart can be broken by love. I'm here because a man who spent 55 years building walls just watched them all come down in a single moment of grace. And what I saw, what I learned, it wasn't just about the end times or the Antichrist. It was about how we're killing ourselves with hatred while love is standing right there waiting for us to notice. A murmur runs through the congregation. I see some people shift uncomfortably in their seats. Others lean forward. Linda wipes her eyes quietly in the back, and Ben reaches for Sarah's hand. This is where my story begins, not with the death that changed everything, but with this moment of truth. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. Let me tell you, I say, my voice growing stronger, about the day my heart stopped beating and I finally started living. Taking a deep breath, I pause and connect with a captivated audience. If my journey touches your heart, support our mission of spreading hope by subscribing. Every soul matters. The Harper farm has been in my family for 4 generations, each acre soaked with sweat and stories. I was born here in 1969 when the world was changing, but our little corner of the Midwest stood still. My father, Tom Harper, was a hard man shaped by harder times. He taught me 2 things: how to work the land and how to hate anyone who didn't share our blood or beliefs. Grace came into our lives in 1995, my youngest daughter, a miracle child born when Linda and I thought we were done having children after Ben and Sarah. She had her mother's gentle spirit and somehow a wisdom beyond her years. Even at 5, she'd sit on the porch and tell me, "Daddy, God loves everybody the same." I'd smile and ruffle her hair, not knowing those words would haunt me after we lost her to leukemia 3 years later. Her death broke something in me. I blamed God first, then the doctors, then anyone who didn't look like us. When the Peterson family, black farmers who'd bought land next door, tried to bring us food after Grace's funeral, I slammed the door in their faces. Their young son Tommy kept trying to talk to me over the fence, calling me Grandpa because I reminded him of someone. I'd chase him away with harsh words that make me ashamed now. Linda tried to save me from myself. "Elliot," she'd plead, "Grace wouldn't want this." She loved everyone, but I was too far gone in my grief and rage. Ben, my eldest, went into seminary despite my mockery. "Praying won't bring her back," I'd snarl when he tried to share his faith. Sarah, my middle child, grew distant, protecting herself from my bitterness. She married a kind man named Michael, but I barely spoke at their wedding. The farm became my fortress and my prison. I let the field swallow my days and talk radio feed my nights. Every failed crop, every bank notice, every change in the world became evidence that everything was falling apart. I survived on spite and coffee, watching my family slip away one by one. Linda left last after 28 years of marriage. "I can't watch you disappear into hatred," she said, closing the door behind her. I was alone then, just me and the ghosts of what could have been. The Peterson boy, Tommy, would still wave sometimes from the safe distance of his family's property. His innocence reminded me too much of Grace, so I'd turn away, feeling the weight of her absence like a stone in my chest. At 55, I was a stereotype of everything wrong with the old guard, bitter racist, clinging to power I'd never really had. The bank was threatening foreclosure, the drought was killing my crops, and my children's calls grew fewer and further between. Ben was pastoring a church 2 towns over. Sarah was building a life with Michael and Linda. Well, nobody knew she was sick then, not even her. The irony was, I thought I was standing firm against a changing world, but I was the one who'd lost his way. Grace's last words to me had been, "Don't be sad, Daddy. Jesus will take care of me." I'd turned those words into a reason to hate God when they were meant to be a bridge to something greater. But that was before the 40 days that changed everything. Before I died on my own land and met the God I'd spent years cursing. Before I learned that Linda was fighting cancer alone, that Sarah was carrying a child who might face the same fate as Grace, that Ben had never stopped praying for my redemption. Before I discovered that sometimes the hardest heart can be cracked open by mercy. They say you can't change a man who doesn't want to change. But sometimes change finds you anyway, throws you to your knees, and forces you to see the truth you've been running from all along. My truth was coming on a hot summer day when my heart decided it had carried enough hatred. But to understand that moment, you need to know how far I had fallen. Because the distance between who I was and who I became, that's where the real miracle lies. My relationships with my family had deteriorated like the old barn at the edge of my property, slowly at first, then all at once. Ben, my pastor's son, would visit every Sunday after his own services, bringing casseroles Linda had made. I'd watch from behind the curtains as he left them on the porch, never knocking, knowing I wouldn't answer. The food would sit there until the evening crows came. Sarah's pregnancy was a complicated joy I denied myself. She was 7 months along when all this started, her baby girl showing the same heart complications that had first signaled Grace's illness. I'd heard about it through Ben, but couldn't bring myself to call. Every time I thought about another grandchild, I'd see Grace's hospital room, smell the antiseptic, hear the final beep of her heart monitor. The fear paralyzed me. Linda's cancer was a secret she kept close, telling only our children and her sister. Stage 4 pancreatic, the kind that doesn't negotiate. She'd found out 3 months before my heart attack, but decided I didn't deserve to know. "Your father has chosen his path," she told Ben. "Let him walk it alone." The bitterness in her voice was a mirror of what I'd become. The farm was failing, not that I'd admit it. The bank, led by Richard Whitaker, a man whose family had owned half the county since before the Civil War, was circling like vultures. I'd caught him driving by, slowly surveying what he thought would soon be his. The drought had killed half my corn, and the equipment was held together with baling wire and prayers I didn't believe in. My dealings with the Peterson family next door got worse after Tommy started leaving small gifts on my fence post, drawings of me and him working the farm together, little crosses he'd made in Sunday school, even a Father's Day card that read to Grandpa in crooked children's writing. His father, James, would come retrieve them in the evenings, his face a mask of dignity I didn't deserve. Their kindness felt like an accusation. The local church, where Ben had grown up and now preached, kept sending members to check on me. I'd hear them talking through the screen door. "Brother Harper, we're praying for you." Their concern fueled my isolation. I'd turn up the radio, drowning out their words with angry voices that matched the chaos in my head. At night, when the house creaked with memories, I'd sometimes find myself in Grace's room. It was exactly as she'd left it: purple walls, butterfly stickers, a Bible on the nightstand marked with her rainbow sticky notes. "God loves everybody, Daddy," she'd say. I'd shut the door quickly, but her voice would follow me into my dreams. The local diner stopped being a refuge after I got into a shouting match with James Peterson over water rights during the drought. Mary, the owner who'd known me since grade school, asked me not to come back until I could be civilized. I started taking my meals at home, heating up whatever I could find, drinking too much cheap whiskey. My world had shrunk to the size of my anger. The news told me the country was falling apart, that people like me were being left behind, that everything I believed in was under attack. I let those voices become my gospel, not realizing they were just echoes of my own fear bouncing off the walls I'd built. The night before everything changed, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky the same pink as Grace's favorite dress. Tommy was in his yard playing with their family dog. He waved like always. I almost waved back almost. Instead, I went inside and locked the door, not knowing it would be my last act as the man I used to be. Not knowing that God was about to take my carefully constructed fortress of hatred and bring it down with a love so fierce it would stop my heart to save my soul. But morning was coming, and with it, a truth I couldn't outrun, a mercy I couldn't deserve, and a chance I never thought I'd get. Sometimes the end of who you are is just the beginning of who you were always meant to be. That morning started like any other, but God had different plans. The sun was already burning through the summer haze as I stepped out to check the irrigation system. I remember thinking the corn looked pitiful, stalks brown and bent like mourners at a funeral. My chest had been tight all morning, but I ignored it. Stubbornness was always my favorite sin. I was near the old oak tree where Grace used to play when the first real pain hit. It felt like someone had wrapped barbed wire around my heart and was pulling it tight. I tried to straighten up, to breathe through it like I had with every other hardship in my life, but this pain wouldn't bargain. Tommy was the one who saw me fall. He'd been watching from their side of the fence, probably hoping for another chance to wave at his self-appointed grandpa. I heard his scream, "Daddy, Grandpa Harper's hurt." Before my knees buckled and the sky tilted sideways, the last thing I saw was James Peterson vaulting over the fence, running toward me with fear in his eyes. The man I'd spent years hating was racing to save my life. Then came the darkness, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed with a presence I can't fully explain. The pain in my chest disappeared, replaced by a weight of another kind, the weight of every hateful word I'd ever spoken, every door I'd slammed, every heart I'd hardened myself against. In that space between heartbeats, I felt it all. The light came gradually like a sunrise, but more alive. It didn't just shine, it knew me. Every hidden corner of my soul was exposed, every justification I'd built around my hatred crumbled. In that light, I couldn't hide from who I'd become. Grace's voice echoed in my memory, "God loves everybody." Daddy, for the first time, I felt the full truth of those words. Jesus appeared then, not like the paintings in church, but real, more real than anything I'd ever known. His eyes held a sorrow so deep it broke what was left of my defenses. "Elliot," he said, my name in his voice became both judgment and mercy. "Why do you persecute me?" I fell to my knees, or whatever passes for knees in that place between life and death. "I don't understand," I managed to say. But I did understand. In every face I'd turned away from, every heart I'd rejected, every difference I'd feared, I'd been turning away from him. "Show him," Jesus said, and suddenly I was watching my life play out like a terrible movie. I saw myself through his eyes, pushing Linda away, mocking Ben's faith, ignoring Sarah's pain. I saw little Tommy's rejected gifts, James Peterson's patient dignity, my community's unanswered prayers. But worse, I saw how my hatred had wounded his heart, how each act of rejection was a nail I'd driven deeper. "Your daughter Grace," he said softly, "she never stopped praying for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Every soul you rejected was a child I died for, Elliot. Every heart you hardened was a heart I suffered to save." I wanted to die, then really die, not this in-between state. The shame was unbearable. But Jesus wasn't finished. He reached out and touched my chest, right where the pain had been. "I'm giving you 40 days, he said. 40 days to learn what Grace knew from the start. 40 days to choose between love and fear." "Why me?" I asked, thinking of all the better people who deserved a second chance. His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Because you're mine," he said simply, "and because a heart that's learned to hate so deeply can learn to love just as deeply. Your story isn't finished, Elliot Harper." The light began to fade, but Jesus' voice followed me back. "Remember 40 days. Choose wisely." As consciousness started to return, I felt a desperate need to stay, to ask more questions, to understand better. But I was already falling back toward the pain, back toward my broken life, back toward a second chance I hadn't earned and couldn't deserve. Before I returned to my body, Jesus showed me what was coming. The vision wasn't like watching a movie, it was like living through every moment, feeling every emotion, understanding every deception with terrible clarity. He showed me how the Antichrist would rise, not through obvious evil, but through subtle corruption of everything good and holy. "Watch carefully," Jesus said, and suddenly I saw crowds gathering around a figure who shone with false light. This leader spoke of unity, peace, and prosperity, but underneath his words lay a darkness that made my soul recoil. People were drawn to him like moths to a flame, not realizing the fire would consume them. "He will come when hearts are desperate," Jesus explained. "When fear has divided brother from brother, neighbor from neighbor, child from parent. He will offer solutions that seem perfect, promise healing that seems complete. Many will follow him because they've forgotten what real love looks like." The vision shifted, showing me churches abandoning truth for acceptance, faithful people choosing comfort over conviction, communities trading their souls for security. I saw how easily good people could be deceived when fear overcame faith. The Antichrist's words were like honey laced with poison, sweet at first, deadly in the end. "Your own hatred," Jesus said gently, "is a seed of what's coming. Every time someone chooses fear over love, the ground becomes more fertile for his arrival. Every divided community, every rejected neighbor, every hardened heart makes his path easier." Then he showed me the resistant small groups of believers who recognized the deception. They weren't the powerful or the prestigious. They were people like James Peterson and his son Tommy, whose love remained strong despite rejection. They were people like Ben, who kept praying despite mockery. They were people like Linda, who chose to forgive even while dying. "Remember grace," Jesus said, and suddenly I saw her not as she was in her final days, but as she is now, radiant with heavenly light. She understood what many adults forget, that love is not a weakness to overcome, but a strength to embrace. The Antichrist's greatest weapon will be convincing people that love is foolish and fear is wise. The vision became more personal. I saw my own farm transformed into a sanctuary, a place where people of all backgrounds found refuge from the coming storm. I saw Tommy and other children playing where Grace once played, their laughter a defiance against encroaching darkness. I saw my family reunited, not by blood alone, but by a love stronger than death. 40 days, Elliot, Jesus repeated. 40 days to learn what grace knew, to heal what hatred broke, to prepare for what's coming. The truth that will defeat the Antichrist isn't complicated, it's as simple as a child's faith and as powerful as a father's love. The final image was the most devastating. I saw myself as I could have been, surrounded by a diverse and loving family, my farm a place of growth and healing instead of isolation and decay. The contrast with what I had chosen pierced my heart more deeply than any physical pain. "This isn't just about saving yourself," Jesus said as the vision began to fade. "It's about showing others that love is always stronger than fear. The Antichrist will offer people everything except what they truly need: the courage to love their enemies, the strength to forgive those who hurt them, the faith to believe in something greater than their own understanding." His final words followed me back toward consciousness. "Tell them what you've seen, Elliot, but more importantly, show them. Love must be lived to be believed. You have 40 days to learn this truth. Use them well." The vision ended, but its clarity remained. I was returning to a world I'd helped divide, carrying a message of unity I'd spent years rejecting. The irony wasn't lost on me. God had chosen his messenger well. Who better to warn about the dangers of hatred than a man who had mastered its bitter arts? Who better to speak of love's power than someone who had wasted decades fighting against it? The light faded and I felt myself being pulled back toward my body, toward pain, toward a second chance I never deserved but desperately needed. 40 days to rewrite a lifetime of wrongs. 40 days to learn what grace had always known. 40 days to choose love over fear. I woke up to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the smell of antiseptic, the same smell that had surrounded Grace in her final days. My chest felt like it had been crushed by a tractor, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the weight of what I'd experienced. Opening my eyes, I found Ben sitting beside my bed, his Bible open on his lap, his face marked by exhaustion and relief. 40 days, I whispered, my voice rough as sandpaper. I was gone 40 days. Ben nodded, his eyes filling with tears. We almost lost you, Dad. If Mr. Peterson hadn't been there, he trailed off, and I saw how much older he looked, how the weeks of watching over me had worn him down. The doctors couldn't explain why you wouldn't wake up. They said your heart was stable, but you just wouldn't come back. The irony struck me then. James Peterson, the man I'd despised, had saved my life, and his son Tommy had raised the alarm. God's sense of humor, it seemed, was as pointed as his mercy. I tried to sit up, but Ben gently pushed me back. "Sarah's been here every day," he said softly. "She talks to you about the baby. The doctors, they say the baby's heart is getting stronger. They can't explain that either." He paused, his hand on my arm. "And Mom. Dad, there's something you need to know about Mom." But before he could continue, Linda herself appeared in the doorway. The sight of her knocked the breath from my healing lungs. She was thin, too thin, her skin pale and stretched tight over her cheekbones. The truth hit me like a physical blow. The vision hadn't just been about my transformation or the Antichrist. It had shown me Linda's cancer, too. "You're awake," she said simply, her voice carrying all the complexity of our shared history. She looked at Ben. "Could you give us a minute?" Our son squeezed my hand and left, closing the door behind him. Linda took his place in the chair, her movements careful, measured. I could see the pain she was hiding, recognized it from watching Grace try to be brave. "How long?" I asked, my voice breaking. "They gave me 6 months," she said. "That was 3 months ago." She looked out the window. Where summer was painting the world in colors she might not see change. "I wasn't going to tell you. I thought you'd lost the right to know." The old me would have gotten angry, would have turned her illness into another reason to be bitter. Instead, I reached for her hand, the first gentle thing I'd done in years. "I'm sorry," I said, the words carrying the weight of decades. "I'm so sorry, Linda." She stared at our joined hands like they were something foreign. 40 days, she said. "I've been coming here every day, watching you sleep, trying to decide if I should hate you or forgive you. Some days I did both." "I saw him," I whispered. "I saw Jesus, Linda. He showed me everything. What I've done, what's coming, how much time we've wasted. And now I couldn't finish." Something in my voice must have reached her, because she looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. "You're different," she said slowly. "Your eyes, they're like they used to be, before we lost Grace." "I've been given 40 days," I told her. 40 days to learn what Grace knew about love, to fix what I broke, to prepare for what's coming. But now, knowing about you, those 40 days mean something different. Linda's hand tightened on mine. "I'm not asking for promises, Elliot. I've had enough broken promises." "No promises," I agreed. "Just truth. And time, whatever time we have left. If you'll let me, I'd like to spend it trying to be the man you deserved all along." The tears she'd been holding back finally fell. 40 days, she whispered. "It took you 40 days to wake up, and now I have about 40 days left. Maybe God's timing isn't as mysterious as we think." Outside, the summer sun painted shadows on the wall, reminders that time was passing, that every moment mattered. I held Linda's hand and felt the miracle of second chances, even as my heart broke knowing our time was measured in days rather than years. But then, maybe that was part of God's plan too, teaching me the value of time by showing me how precious little of it we had left. My first real test came the day I was discharged from the hospital. James Peterson was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his truck. Linda had gone ahead with Ben to prepare the house, leaving me to face the man who'd saved my life. I walked toward him slowly, each step heavy with the weight of years of hatred. "Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice catching, "I thank you for saving my life." He studied me with eyes that had seen too much prejudice but hadn't let it poison him. "Tommy's been asking about you every day," he said finally. "That boy's got a heart bigger than all your fields put together." The mention of Tommy broke something in me. I remembered how I'd chased him away, how he'd kept coming back with his innocent "Hi, Grandpa," and those handmade gifts I'd ignored. Could you tell him his Grandpa Harper would like to talk to him, if that's okay with you?" James straightened up, surprise flickering across his face. "You sure about that? Because that boy's been hurt enough. I won't let him be hurt again." 40 days, I said, more to myself than to him. Jesus gave me 40 days to learn what my Grace knew, that love is stronger than fear. Your son, he's been teaching me that lesson all along. I was just too blind to see it. Something shifted in James's expression. "You're different," he said, echoing Linda's words. "Something changed while you were out." "Everything changed," I replied. I died, Mr. Peterson, really died. And Jesus, he showed me what hatred does to his heart. Every time I turned away your family, every time I hurt that boy, I was hurting him. James was quiet for a long moment. My grandmother, he said finally, she used to tell me that God's hardest work is softening hard hearts. Looks like he put in some overtime with you. I laughed, surprising both of us. That he did, and now I've got 40 days to prove it wasn't wasted effort. 40 days, James asked, to learn love, to fix what I broke, to prepare for what's coming. I hesitated. And to spend whatever time Linda has left trying to be worthy of forgiveness. Understanding dawned in his eyes. We heard about Linda's cancer. Mary at the diner's been organizing meals, but we didn't know if you'd accept them from folks like us. The shame of my past prejudices hit me fresh. I don't deserve any kindness from your family or this community, but if you're willing, I'd like to start over. Not just for 40 days, but for however long God gives me to make things right. James pushed himself off his truck. Tommy's at home. It's his birthday today, 8 years old. He's having a little party in our backyard. The fence gate's open if you want to stop by. The invitation was more than I deserved. I'd like that. But I should warn you, people might not understand. They might talk. James smiled, and I saw in it the same forgiveness I'd seen in Jesus' eyes. Let them talk. Maybe they'll learn something about love too. He turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Elliot? Grace used to play with Tommy sometimes through the fence. She'd tell him stories about Jesus, about how God loves everybody the same. That's why he started calling you Grandpa. She told him you had a heart of gold, just covered up by a lot of hurt. The words hit me like a physical blow. My Grace, even then, had been trying to teach me. Through death, through Tommy, through all these years, she'd never stopped believing in the good buried under my bitterness. I watched James drive away, then looked at the hospital where I'd spent 40 days hovering between life and death. The summer sun was high, making everything seem clearer, brighter. In a few hours, I'd walk through that fence gate to a birthday party, carrying 40 days worth of apologies and a lifetime of lessons to learn. But first, I had a stop to make. Grace's room had been closed for years, but in her closet was a box of her old toys. Somewhere in there was a stuffed giraffe she'd always said she was saving for someone special. It was time for that giraffe to find its way to Tommy's birthday party, a gift from one child of God to another, delivered by a man learning finally how to love. The next few weeks unfolded like a spring thaw, gradual, sometimes painful, but bringing new life with each passing day. Tommy's birthday party became my first step toward redemption. I walked through the Petersons' gate, clutching Grace's stuffed giraffe, feeling like a trespasser in a world of joy. The children fell silent when they saw me, but Tommy broke into a run. Grandpa Harper, you came before I could react. He had his arms wrapped around my waist, his face pressed against my stomach. I stood frozen, the giraffe dangling from my hand, tears threatening to spill. Happy birthday, Tommy, I managed to say, holding out the giraffe. This was Grace's. She would have wanted you to have it. The boy's eyes went wide. Really? Your Grace, he took the giraffe reverently like it was made of gold instead of well-worn fabric. Daddy, look, Grace sent me a birthday present. James caught my eye across the yard, nodding slightly. His wife Marie brought me a piece of cake, her kindness more convicting than any sermon. The other parents watched cautiously, but their children, following Tommy's lead, soon had me playing awkward games and answering endless questions. That evening, exhausted but somehow lighter, I sat with Linda on our porch. She was having a good day, the pain manageable enough for her to enjoy the sunset. I saw you today, she said quietly, through the Petersons' fence. You looked happy. I admitted, and terrified. Every kind word feels like judgment, Linda. Every smile reminds me of how much time I wasted being angry. She took my hand, a gesture becoming familiar again. Maybe that's the point. Maybe feeling that weight is part of learning to put it down. The changes rippled outward. Word spread about my conversion, though few knew the full story. Some called it a miracle. Others suspected a stroke had scrambled my brain. The diner became a testing ground. Mary, the owner, watched hawk-eyed as I took my usual booth one morning. Here you've been spending time with the Peterson boy, she said, coffee pot hovering. Yes, Ma, I am. He's teaching me what Grace knew all along. I met her eyes. I owe you an apology, Mary. For a lot of things. She poured the coffee slowly. Apologies are good. Actions are better. Yes, Ma, I am. That's why I'd like to host the church picnic this year. At my farm. All are welcome. The words came out before I'd fully thought them through, but they felt right. Mary's eyebrows shot up. All. All I confirmed. Just like Grace would have wanted. The news spread faster than gossip about a scandal. Ben helped me organize it, his pastor's heart understanding what I was trying to do. Sarah, despite her difficult pregnancy, insisted on helping too. Even Linda, on her stronger days, sat in Grace's old room making lists and calling people she hadn't spoken to in years. The day of the picnic dawned bright and clear. Tables dotted the yard where Grace used to play. The Peterson family came early to help set up, Tommy proudly carrying Grace's giraffe. People trickled in cautiously at first, then in steady streams. Black, white, Hispanic families I'd scorned or ignored now gathered on my land, bringing food and cautious smiles. I stood on my porch, overwhelmed, until Ben touched my arm. Dad? They're waiting for you to say grace. Walking to the center of the gathering, I felt every eye on me. The old me would have retreated into anger. Instead, I looked at Tommy's trusting face, at Linda's proud smile, at the diverse crowd that had chosen to give me a chance. Before I pray, I said, my voice carrying across the sudden silence, I need to say something. Many of you knew the old Elliot Harper, a man so lost in hatred he couldn't see God's love right in front of him. That man died literally 40 days ago. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I continued, Jesus gave me a second chance and a warning about the darkness that comes when we choose fear over love. But right now, looking at all of you here, I don't see different races or backgrounds. I see Grace's family, all of you, because that's how she saw the world. And that's how God sees it too. I bowed my head, feeling the weight and lightness of transformation. Lord, thank you for second chances. Thank you for children who teach us love, for neighbors who show us mercy, for family that never stops believing in us. Bless this food and these people, all your people. Amen. When I looked up, there were tears on many faces. Mary from the diner was nodding slowly. James Peterson's hand was on my shoulder. Tommy was beaming like his namesake giraffe had come to life. And Linda, supported by Sarah, was smiling through her pain. The picnic became a turning point. People who had avoided each other for years found themselves sharing recipes and stories. Children played together while parents marveled at their easy acceptance. The Peterson boy wasn't the only one calling me Grandpa by the end of the day. As the sun set and the last guest left, I sat on Grace's old swing, exhausted but peaceful. Tommy came to say goodbye, clutching his giraffe. Grandpa Harper? Grace was right about you, he said solemnly. What do you mean, son? She told me your heart was gold, just needed cleaning. He hugged me quickly and ran to his parents, leaving me to ponder how often God speaks truth through the mouths of children. 28 days left, I thought, watching them leave. 28 days to keep learning, to keep loving, to keep preparing for what Jesus had shown me was coming. But for the first time, I wasn't facing those days alone. Not every day was a triumph. The old habits, like weeds in my cornfields, tried to resurface when I least expected them. The bank's latest foreclosure notice triggered a rage so familiar it scared me. Richard Whitaker's smug face as he drove past my property almost sent me spiraling back into darkness. Your land's worth more than your pride, he'd called out one afternoon, rolling down his window. Time's running out, Harper. Just like it did for your daddy. My fists clenched automatically. The old Elliot would have stormed over, would have given Whitaker exactly what he'd been hoping for, an excuse. Instead, I heard Grace's voice, Daddy, remember what Jesus said about loving your enemies. Later that night, I confessed my struggle to Linda during one of our evening talks. She was having a bad day, the pain evident in the tight lines around her mouth, but she still listened. I wanted to hurt him, Linda. All that hatred. It's still in there, waiting. She reached for my hand, her skin paper thin. Of course it is. 40 days doesn't erase a lifetime, but you chose differently this time. That's what matters. Watching Linda battle cancer became my hardest lesson in love. She refused to stay in the hospital, insisting on spending her remaining days at home. I moved back in, sleeping on the couch, learning to be her caregiver. The intimacy of it, helping her walk, holding her hair back during bouts of sickness, measuring medications, broke my heart daily. "You don't have to do this," she said one particularly rough night. "Ben and Sarah would understand if it's too much." I was changing her sheets, my hands shaking with exhaustion. "I'm not doing this for them, or even for you. I'm doing it because this is what love looks like. I just wish I'd remembered that sooner." Sarah visited daily, her own pregnancy advancing as her mother declined. The parallel wasn't lost on any of us, one life preparing to enter the world as another prepared to leave it. The doctors monitored both of them closely, speaking in careful terms about possibilities and preparations. Tommy started coming by too, his visits bringing light to our darkening days. He'd sit with Linda, showing her his drawings or reading from Grace's old Bible. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing together, and the sound would bring me to my knees with gratitude and grief. The hardest moments came when old acquaintances visited. Their awkward sympathy, their whispered questions about my change of heart, their not quite hidden judgment at all tested my newfound patience. Some even suggested Linda's cancer was God's punishment for our broken marriage. One deacon, after making such an insinuation, found himself being firmly shown the door by James Peterson, who'd become a regular presence in our lives. Some folks, James said afterward, mistake cruelty for righteousness. Jesus never did. The community slowly divided into two camps, those who believed in my transformation and those who waited for me to fail. The pressure might have broken me if not for my nightly ritual of reading Grace's Bible, my fingers tracing her childish notes in the margins. God is love. Jesus loves everybody. Daddy's heart is gold. Linda's strength faded as summer deepened. One evening after a particularly difficult day, she asked me to sit with her in Grace's room. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "about time and forgiveness and second chances." I helped her adjust her pillows, my throat tight. "Linda, Let me finish. I was so angry with you for so long. After Grace, after everything, I thought hatred was easier than healing. But watching you these past weeks, I understand now what real change looks like." Tears slid down my cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." None of us deserve grace, Elliot. That's what makes it grace. She touched my face with trembling fingers. "I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because love is a choice." Grace knew that. Now we do too. The next morning I found Tommy sitting on our porch steps waiting. "Grandpa Harper, can I show you something?" He led me to the fence line between our properties, where he'd planted a small garden. In the center stood Grace's old windmill, repainted and spinning in the breeze. "Dad helped me fix it," he explained. I thought, maybe Grace would like seeing it from heaven. I knelt beside him, this child who'd loved me through my worst, and felt the weight of my remaining days. "I think she'd love it, Tommy. And you know what? I think she sent you to help fix more than just windmills." 20 days left now. 20 days to keep learning love's harder lessons. 20 days to prepare for what Jesus had shown me was coming. 20 days to cherish Linda's presence and brace for her absence. The old Elliot would have raged against this timeline. The new one was learning to trust God's perfect, painful timing. That night, watching Linda sleep, I whispered my own prayer, "Lord, help me love like Grace did, completely, simply, without counting the cost. And when the darkness comes that you showed me, help me remember these days when love proved stronger than hate." Outside, Tommy's windmill caught the moonlight, its shadow dancing on our wall like Grace's old ballet recitals. A reminder that even in darkness, love keeps spinning, keeps catching light, keeps pointing us toward home. The bank's final notice arrived like a thunderclap on a clear day. Richard Whitaker had called in my loans, demanding full payment within 48 hours. His real message was clear: my land or my soul. The old rage rose in my throat like bile, but something else rose with it: clarity. I found him at the diner, holding court with his usual sycophants. The room fell silent as I walked in. Mary gripped her coffee pot tighter, remembering past confrontations. But this time was different. "Mr. Whitaker," I said, standing by his table, "I need 5 minutes of your time, in private." He smirked, playing to his audience. Whatever you have to say, Harper, you can say it here. We're all friends, aren't we? I thought of Jesus' eyes, of Grace's faith, of Tommy's innocent love. You're trying to take my farm, the farm where my daughter died, where my granddaughter might be born. I understand why it's business. But I'm asking you, man to man, for 30 more days. 30 days won't change the numbers, Harper. You're finished, just like your father was. The mention of my father sparked the old anger, but Grace's voice whispered in my memory, love your enemies, Daddy. It's the hardest part, but it's the most important. You're right, I said quietly, shocking everyone, including myself. The numbers don't lie. But this isn't about numbers anymore. My ex-wife is dying of cancer. She has weeks left. That farm is where she raised our children, where she wants to spend her last days. I'm not asking for mercy for myself. I'm asking for mercy for her. The diner had gone completely still. Even the kitchen staff had stopped to listen. Whitaker shifted uncomfortably, his smirk faltering. I'll pay you back, I continued. Every penny. The Petersons, the family I spent years hating, they've offered to help. The community's coming together. But Linda, she doesn't have time for legal battles. She just has days. Please, 30 days. Mary stepped forward, coffee pot still in hand. Richard Whitaker, your mama would turn in her grave if she knew you were putting a dying woman out of her home. Others joined in, voices I hadn't expected to support me. Come on. Rich, have a heart, it's just 30 days. Whitaker's face reddened. This is business, not charity. No, James Peterson's voice cut through the murmurs. He'd entered quietly during my speech. This is humanity. And I'm making it my business. He pulled out his checkbook. I'll cover his next payment. Right here, right now. James, no, I protested. You can't. Can't what? Help a neighbor? Love an enemy. Isn't that what your Grace would want? Whitaker stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You people don't understand business. And you don't understand community, Mary interrupted. Or maybe you've forgotten. Remember when your daddy died, Richard? Remember who helped your mama keep your house? The whole town came together, including Elliot's father. I hadn't known that. From Whitaker's expression, he'd hoped everyone had forgotten. He looked around the diner, seeing not the usual audience for his power plays, but a community rediscovering its heart. 30 days, he said finally. Not 1 day more. And Peterson's check better clear. He stormed out, leaving a wake of whispers and relief. I turned to James, overwhelmed. I can't let you do this. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do it. Just like you're choosing love over hatred these days, he smiled. Besides, I hear your corn's coming in strong this year. You'll pay me back. Mary brought coffee for everyone on the house. The diner buzzed with conversation, plans, ideas for helping. Someone suggested a fundraiser. Another offered to help with the harvest. The community that I'd shut out for so long was opening its arms. But the victory was short-lived. As I walked home, planning how to tell Linda the good news, my phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice tight with panic. Dad, come quick. Mom's taking a turn. The doctors, they're saying we need to prepare. I ran all the way home, my heart pounding with more than exertion. The farm's driveway was already filled with cars, Ben's, Sarah's, the hospice nurses. And there was Tommy, sitting on the porch steps with his giraffe, tears running down his face. I was reading to her, he said as I rushed past. She was smiling. Then she just, Grandpa, is she going to see Grace soon? I couldn't answer. Inside, the house was full of quiet movement and whispered prayers. Linda lay in Grace's bed, her breathing shallow, her hand in Sarah's. Ben stood by the window, his Bible open, his voice steady as he read Psalms. Linda's voice was barely a whisper. Did you save the farm? Yes, I said, kneeling beside her. The community saved it. Saved me. Just rest now. She smiled faintly. Good. I wanted to know you'd be okay, that you'd remember. Remember what? Love. Remember that God's timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it. Outside, the sun was setting. Through the window, I could see Tommy's windmill spinning in Grace's garden. 15 days left of my promised 40. But looking at Linda's peaceful face, I realized some lessons couldn't be contained in any number of days. Some truths had to be lived moment by moment, heartbeat by heartbeat, love by love. Just when we thought the worst had passed with the bank situation, a devastating storm swept through our county. The rain fell in sheets, flooding fields and washing away topsoil. Lightning struck the Petersons' barn, setting it ablaze. I watched from my window as their life's work went up in flames. Without thinking, I ran into the downpour. Tommy's screams cut through the storm. His dog was still inside. James was struggling with the barn door, which had warped in the heat. The old me would have turned back, would have said it wasn't my problem. Instead, I heard Grace's voice. Love means helping, Daddy, even when it's scary. Get back, I shouted to James, then crashed my shoulder into the door. Together we broke through. The heat was unbearable, smoke thick enough to choke on. Tommy's dog barked somewhere in the inferno. I thought of Grace, of Linda fighting for every breath, of second chances that shouldn't be wasted. Jesus, I prayed, plunging deeper into the flames. I'm not done learning yet. I found the dog huddled under a workbench, terrified but alive. Getting out was harder. The smoke had thickened, the flames were spreading. My lungs burned, my eyes stung. Then I felt James's hand grab my shirt, guiding me toward the exit. We emerged into the rain, coughing and gasping. Tommy ran to his dog, sobbing with relief. The barn was a total loss, but we were alive. The community gathered quickly, bringing water, blankets, support. Someone had called the fire department, but the roads were flooded, delaying their arrival. Linda watched it all from her window, too weak to leave her bed but alert enough to understand. When I came back inside, soaked and smoke-stained, she touched my face with trembling fingers. You could have died, she whispered. I couldn't let Tommy lose anything else, I replied. Not when he's helped me find so much. The next morning revealed the storm's full devastation. The Petersons had lost not just their barn but much of their equipment. Other farms were underwater, crops ruined. The community gathered at the diner, shell-shocked and worried. That's when I heard his voice again, clear as it had been during my 40 days. Now show them what love looks like in action. I stood up, drawing everyone's attention. My farm was spared the worst, I said. I've got dry storage, extra equipment, and thanks to this community, I still have my land. It's all yours, whatever you need. The room went silent. Richard Whitaker, who'd come to assess his investment, scoffed. You can barely keep your own farm running, Harper. This is business suicide. No, I said firmly, this is what Grace knew all along. We're not meant to survive alone. We're meant to lift each other up. James tried to protest, but I held up my hand. You saved my life twice now, once in my field, once by helping with the bank. Let me do this. Let me show my daughter in heaven that her daddy finally understands. What happened next was like watching a miracle unfold in real time. People started offering what they could: equipment, labor, storage space. Mary announced the diner would provide free meals for anyone helping with cleanup. Even some of Whitaker's regular cronies broke ranks to offer assistance. Ben organized the church to help coordinate efforts. Sarah, despite her condition, managed the logistics from Linda's bedside. Tommy appointed himself my special assistant, his faith in me never wavering. Grandpa Harper, he said, as we worked to salvage what we could from the barn's ruins, is this what Grace meant about God's love being bigger than just one person? I paused, looking at this child who'd somehow become one of my greatest teachers. Yes, son, I think this is exactly what she meant. The work was hard, the days long. My muscles ached, my lungs still burned from the smoke. But with each passing day, I saw walls breaking down that had nothing to do with barns or floods. People who'd never spoken were working side by side. Children played together without seeing color. The community was remembering what it meant to be whole. Linda rallied enough one afternoon to sit on the porch and watch. Look what you started, she said softly. I didn't start anything, I replied. I just finally stopped fighting what Grace and Tommy and Jesus were trying to teach me all along. 10 days left of my 40, and the lessons were coming faster now. Each act of kindness, each moment of community felt like preparation for something bigger. The vision Jesus had shown me of the coming darkness made more sense because now I understood that the only defense against that darkness would be communities bound together by love. That evening, as the sun set behind clouds still heavy with rain, I sat with Tommy on what remained of his father's barn. The boy had his giraffe in his lap and a question in his eyes. "Grandpa Harper, do you think Grace is proud of you?" I looked across the fields where people were still working together, where barriers were falling with each passing hour. "I hope so, Tommy. I'm just trying to love like she did with my whole heart." He nodded sagely. "She is. She told me in my dream last night. She said you're becoming who God always knew you could be." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, watching the community continue its work as night fell. Out of the mouths of babes comes the wisdom that can save us all. Linda's decline accelerated in the days following the storm. The doctor said it was a combination of stress, progression of the cancer, and her body simply growing tired. I spent every moment I could by her side, reading from Grace's Bible, sharing memories, making up for lost time even as time slipped away. One particularly lucid morning, she asked to see Tommy. The boy came immediately, clutching Grace's giraffe and a new drawing he'd made. It showed all of us together, Linda, me, Ben, Sarah, himself, and two figures with wings he'd labeled Grace and baby sister. "It's beautiful," Linda whispered, touching the paper with trembling fingers. "Tommy, can you do something for me?" "Anything. Grandma, Linda," he said solemnly. He'd started calling her that a few weeks ago, and the name had brought tears to her eyes. "Take care of Grandpa Harper for me. He's learning to love again, but sometimes he forgets. Promise you'll remind him." Tommy looked at me, then back at Linda. "I promise. Grace helps me know what to say." Linda smiled, her face radiant despite the pain. "I believe she does." She turned to me. "Elliot, there's something in my bedside drawer. I've been saving it." I opened the drawer and found a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. "What are these?" "Letters I wrote to you every year on Grace's birthday. Things I couldn't say out loud. I was too angry, too hurt. But I never stopped loving you, never stopped praying for you to find your way back to love." My hand shook as I untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated just months after Grace's death. "My dearest Elliot," it began, "today our baby would have been 9. I lit a candle and remembered how she used to say your heart was gold." Read them later. Linda said softly, "Right now I need you to listen. 7 days left of your 40, right?" I nodded, unable to speak. "God's timing is perfect, Elliot. I understand now why he gave you 40 days. It wasn't just about changing you. It was about this moment, about all of us learning what Grace knew all along." Tommy sat quietly beside her, holding her hand as if he'd been doing it all his life. Through the window, we could hear the community still working together to rebuild after the storm. Sarah's voice carried from downstairs, where she was coordinating relief efforts. Ben's prayers drifted up from the porch, where he sat counseling someone. "Look what love built," Linda whispered. "Look what forgiveness created. Promise me you won't forget when I'm gone. Promise me you'll keep choosing love even when it's hard." "I promise," I said, my voice breaking. "Linda, I'm so sorry for all the years we lost." She shook her head slightly. "No years are lost if they lead us where we need to be. Kiss me, Elliot, like you used to when we were young and thought love was simple." I leaned down and kissed her gently, tasting salt from my tears. When I pulled back, she was smiling, her eyes focused on something beyond us. "Grace," she breathed. "Oh, my baby, you've grown so beautiful." Tommy squeezed her hand. "Tell her I'm taking good care of her giraffe." Linda's smile widened. "She knows, sweetheart. She's so proud of you." Of all of us, her eyes found mine one last time. "Elliot, love wins. Remember that when the darkness comes. Love always wins." Her breathing slowed, each breath a gentle surrender. Tommy began to sing "Jesus Loves Me," his clear child's voice carrying Grace's favorite hymn into the gathering dusk. I joined in my rough voice, steadying his as Linda slipped away, still smiling at something or someone we couldn't see. In the moment she left us, a dove landed on Grace's old windmill outside the window, its wings catching the last light of day. 7 days left of my 40 and my heart was breaking and healing all at once. Tommy laid Grace's giraffe next to Linda's hand and whispered, "Tell Grace I'll help Grandpa Harper remember about love." Linda's face held such peace that for a moment, just a moment, I could almost see what she had seen our Grace, grown tall and beautiful, welcoming her mother home. The morning of Linda's funeral, Sarah went into premature labor. The same hospital where Grace had died now held both loss and possibility in its sterile halls. Ben and I paced the waiting room while Michael, Sarah's husband, stayed by her side. The doctors' faces were grim. The baby's heart condition, similar to what had taken Grace, was complicating everything. "Dad," Ben said softly, his hand on my shoulder, "we need to prepare ourselves. The doctors say." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Grace sent us Tommy to teach us about love." Linda held on until she knew we'd learned. This baby is going to live." Tommy arrived with his parents, still wearing his funeral clothes, Grace's giraffe clutched tight. "Grandpa Harper, can I pray for the baby? Like Grace used to pray for me." The simplicity of his faith broke something in me. We gathered in a circle, me, Ben, the Petersons, and several community members who'd come straight from the funeral. Tommy's prayer was pure and profound in its innocence. "Jesus," he said, "Grace told me you love babies extra special. Please help Sarah's baby have a strong heart. And tell Grandma Linda and Grace we miss them, but we're taking care of each other like they taught us." Hours passed. More people arrived, Mary from the diner bringing coffee, Richard Whitaker's wife with sandwiches, farmers taking breaks from their fields to check on us. The waiting room became a testimony to the community we'd rebuilt, to the love that had replaced hatred. Finally, Michael emerged, tears streaming down his face. My heart stopped until I saw his smile. "It's a girl," he announced. They said it's a miracle. Her heart just got stronger during the delivery. They can't explain it." The room erupted in joy and tears. Ben hugged me tight, whispering, "Grace is watching, Dad. She and Mom both." When they let us see them, Sarah was cradling a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. "Dad," she said weakly, "meet your granddaughter. We're calling her Grace Linda Harper." I approached the bed carefully, overwhelmed by the symmetry of it all. One Grace taken, another given. One heart stopped, another strengthened. Tommy pressed his face against the glass of the nursery window later, studying his new cousin. "Grandpa Harper," he whispered. "The first Grace told me this would happen. In my dreams. She said the new baby would help us remember about love and miracles." I lifted him up for a better view. "When did she tell you that, buddy?" "The night Grandma Linda went to heaven. Grace said we had to be ready for happy tears, not just sad ones." The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, funeral arrangements, and community support. Linda was laid to rest beside our first Grace, their headstones sharing space like they shared heaven. Little Grace grew stronger each day, defying medical expectations. 5 days left, Ben noted one evening as we sat in Sarah's hospital room. "Of your 40 days, Dad, how are you feeling?" I looked around at my family, Sarah dozing with baby Grace in her arms, Michael keeping watch, Ben with his ever-present Bible, Tommy coloring on the floor with his giraffe nearby. Through the window I could see the sun setting over the farm where so much had been lost and found. I feel I paused, searching for words. I feel like I understand why Jesus gave me 40 days. Not just to change me, but to prepare me. To show me that love doesn't end with death, it just changes form. Linda and Grace aren't gone, they're just loving us differently now. Tommy looked up from his drawing. "Like through baby Grace and me." "Exactly like that, buddy." Sarah stirred, adjusting the baby in her arms. "Dad, would you pray? Like you used to when Grace was sick." I placed one hand on baby Grace and the other on Tommy's head. The prayer came easily now, words of gratitude and hope replacing the old bitter questions. Outside, a dove landed on the window ledge, watching us with bright eyes. 5 days left to prepare for what Jesus had shown me was coming. But now I understood every loss had been preparation, every healing a lesson, every new life a reminder that love was stronger than death, stronger than hatred, stronger than any darkness that might come. The night after we brought baby Grace home from the hospital, I finally found the courage to read Linda's letters. Sitting in our old bedroom, now filled with boxes of memories, I untied the faded blue ribbon with trembling hands. 20 years of unspoken words spilled out before me. The first letter caught my breath. Dear Elliot, today our Grace would have been 9. I watched you at the cemetery, standing so far from her grave, and my heart broke all over again. Not just for her, but for you. You're building walls so high, my love. You can't even reach our daughter anymore. Letter after letter chronicled our descent into darkness and her unwavering hope for light. She wrote about Ben's first sermon, where he spoke about Grace's simple faith. About Sarah's wedding, where my silence hurt more than angry words would have. About Tommy, who reminded her so much of Grace that it physically hurt to watch me reject him. Dearest Elliot. One letter began, today I saw you chase Tommy away from the fence again. He dropped his drawing in the dirt. It was of you and him working the farm together. Grace used to draw pictures like that. Remember how she'd color outside the lines and say God's love was too big for boundaries? Tommy has that same way of seeing past the walls we build. My hands shook as I read the letter dated just after she'd received her cancer diagnosis. My love, I'm dying. The doctors say months, maybe less. Part of me wants to tell you to see if the man I married, the one who held my hand through Grace's illness, is still in there somewhere. But I'm afraid not of death, but of seeing hatred win one last time. So I'll keep praying, keep hoping that somehow God will reach past your walls before it's too late. Then I found something unexpected, letters from Grace herself, saved by Linda. Childish handwriting on paper now yellow with age. Dear Jesus, please help Daddy remember how to love. His heart is gold, just dirty. Like when the tractor gets muddy, but it's still shiny underneath. Love, Grace. Another, dear Jesus, I had a dream about Daddy. He was crying, but they were happy tears because he learned to love everybody like you do. Is that going to happen? Tommy was there too. I don't know who Tommy is yet, but he's important. Love, Grace. The last letter from Linda was written during my 40 days in the hospital. My dearest Elliot, I'm sitting beside your bed, watching you breathe. The doctors can't explain why you won't wake up. But I wonder, is Jesus finally breaking through those walls? Are you learning what Grace tried so hard to teach us? I don't have much time left, my love, but I forgive you. I forgave you years ago. I just pray you'll learn to forgive yourself. A soft knock interrupted my reading. It was Tommy, clutching his giraffe in a new drawing. Grandpa Harper, can I show you something? I wiped my eyes quickly. Come here, buddy. He climbed onto my lap, something I wouldn't have allowed just months ago. I drew this for you. It's all of us see. There's you and me and baby Grace and big Grace and Grandma Linda are angels watching over us. And look, everyone's hearts are gold. I stared at the picture, remembering Grace's words about my heart being gold under the dirt. Tommy, did Grace ever talk to you before you knew me? He nodded solemnly. In dreams. She said you needed me to be patient because love takes time to grow back once it's been hurt. She said you had a garden in your heart, but it was covered up with rocks, and I had to help dig them out. Fresh tears fell as I held him close. 3 days left of my 40, and here was Grace still teaching me through this child who'd loved me despite myself. Linda's letters surrounded us, their pages filled with a hope that had outlasted hatred. Tommy, I whispered, thank you for not giving up on me. He hugged me back. Grace said I couldn't give up because love doesn't give up, even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. That's what makes it gold. Outside, the sunset painted the sky the same pink as Grace's favorite dress. Somewhere I knew Linda was smiling. Our Grace had known all along what it had taken me 40 days to learn, that love's patience is more powerful than hatred's walls. The day I brought Linda's letters to church marked a turning point for our entire community. Standing at the same pulpit where I'd first shared my testimony, I held up the weathered bundle of paper that chronicled 20 years of faithful love. These letters. I began, my voice thick with emotion, show what real love looks like. Not the easy kind that comes when everything's perfect, but the kind that persists through darkness. My wife wrote to me every year after we lost our Grace, even when I was lost in hatred. She never stopped believing that love could win. The congregation sat in stunned silence as I read excerpts from her letters. Many were weeping openly, recognizing their own struggles with forgiveness and fear in Linda's words. Richard Whitaker sat in the back, his usual arrogance replaced by something that looked like shame. 2 days left, I continued, of the 40 days Jesus gave me to learn what my daughter Grace knew instinctively, that love is stronger than fear, stronger than hatred, stronger than hatred, stronger than death itself. But these lessons weren't just for me. I gestured to the diverse faces before me, the Petersons sitting proudly in the front row, Tommy with his ever-present giraffe, families who'd once avoided each other now sharing pews and hymn books. Look around. Look what love built when we finally let it in. Mary from the diner stood up suddenly. Elliot's right, she said, her voice carrying. We've all built walls, all chosen fear over love at some point. But these past weeks, seeing this community come together after the storm, watching love win over hatred, it's like Grace and Linda are still teaching us. Richard Whitaker cleared his throat. Harper, he called out, those loans, consider them settled. My father would have done the same. The church erupted in murmurs and tears. Tommy ran up to the pulpit and threw his arms around my waist. See, Grandpa Harper? Grace said the rocks would all get moved if we just kept loving. Ben took over the service, leading us in Grace's favorite hymn. As we sang, something extraordinary happened. People began moving, crossing old boundaries, embracing those they'd once avoided. The Peterson family found themselves surrounded by former critics, receiving long overdue apologies. After the service, James Peterson approached me with tears in his eyes. Your Grace, he said quietly. She used to talk to Tommy through the fence. Did you know that? She'd tell him stories about Jesus' love, about how her daddy had a heart of gold under all the hurt. That little girl saw clearer than any of us. Baby Grace, cradled in Sarah's arms, began to coo as if in agreement. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows created a rainbow around her tiny face, reminiscent of the sticky notes her namesake used to put in her Bible. 2 days, Tommy mused, holding his giraffe thoughtfully. Grace says that's enough time for lots of love to grow. I knelt beside him. She's still talking to you, buddy. He nodded solemnly. She says the hard part's coming, like you saw when you were with Jesus. But we're ready now because we learned how to love right. She says love is like a shield that the darkness can't get through. Looking around at our transformed community, at the fallen walls, the healed hearts, the bridges built where chasms once gaped, I finally understood the full purpose of my 40 days. It wasn't just about my personal redemption. It was about preparing all of us for what Jesus had shown me was coming. The Antichrist would offer a counterfeit unity, a false peace built on fear and control. But here in this small country church, we'd discovered the real thing: unity forged in love, strengthened by forgiveness, tested by hardship, and proven genuine by its power to transform even the hardest hearts. As people lingered, sharing stories and plans for the future, I felt Linda and Grace's presence almost tangibly. They had never given up on love's power to break through walls and heal broken hearts. Through their faithfulness, a racist farmer's darkness had become a beacon of light, and a divided community had become a family. 2 days left, and the most important lesson was clear: when love writes the story, every ending becomes a beginning. In the final days of my 40, a remarkable transformation began on my farm. What started as a simple offer to help the storm victims turned into something much bigger, a vision of what community could really be. I found Tommy sitting on Grace's old swing one morning, looking thoughtful. Grandpa Harper, he said, I had another dream about Grace. She showed me the farm all full of people, different kinds of people, all living and working together. She said it's what the farm wants to be. The idea took root immediately, as if it had been waiting to bloom. That evening I gathered Ben, Sarah with baby Grace, and the Petersons in our living room. I want to turn the farm into a sanctuary, I announced. A place where people can find healing, learn about love, prepare for what's coming. Like Noah's Ark, Tommy piped up, but for people instead of animals. The idea spread through the community like wildfire. People started showing up with tools, paint, and willing hands. The old barn that had survived the storm became a meeting hall. Empty fields were transformed into community gardens. Grace's room became the first of several spaces for families in need. Richard Whitaker, to everyone's surprise, arrived with architectural plans. My firm's donation, he said gruffly. Every ark needs good blueprints. We worked through the last days of my 40 as if racing against time. The community that had come together after the storm now had a permanent place to grow stronger. I watched in amazement as former enemies worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the joy of creating something bigger than themselves. Sarah set up a nursery where baby Grace could spend time with other children. Mom and Grace would love this, she said, tears in her eyes. It's like their love is still growing, still changing lives. Ben established regular services in the converted barn, but they weren't typical church meetings. People of all faiths were welcome to share their stories, their hopes, their fears about the future. This is how we'll resist the darkness, he said. Not with walls, but with bridges. The Petersons moved into the farmhouse next door, which had stood empty for years. James helped me organize farming classes, teaching sustainable practices to anyone who wanted to learn. His wife Marie started a kitchen that fed anyone who was hungry. Tommy appointed himself the official greeter, still carrying Grace's giraffe everywhere he went. Grace says everyone needs a friend when they're scared or sad, he explained. Sometimes it's a giraffe, sometimes it's just somebody who smiles at you. On the last full day of my 40, I stood on the porch at sunset, watching people work and children play. The farm that had once been my fortress of isolation had become a beacon of hope. Gardens bloomed where weeds had grown. Laughter echoed where silence had reigned. A young family arrived that evening looking tired and afraid. Tommy ran to greet them, giraffe in hand. "Welcome home," he called out. "Did Grace send you?" "She sends lots of people here." The mother looked confused, but her children smiled at Tommy's enthusiasm. I walked down to meet them, remembering how I would have turned them away just 40 days ago. "I'm Elliot Harper," I said, extending my hand. "And this is Tommy, one of our many angels in training." We heard this was a place where people could start over, the father said hesitantly. A place where love is stronger than fear. "That's exactly what it is," I replied, thinking of my own journey. "My daughter Grace taught me that everyone's heart is gold under the hurt. We're just here to help dig out the rocks." As I showed them to their rooms, Grace's old room, where Linda had spent her final days, I noticed something remarkable. On the wall between Grace's butterfly stickers and Linda's favorite scripture verse hung a child's drawing. It showed a farm full of people, all with golden hearts, and two angels watching from above. "Tommy," I called out, "did you draw this?" He shook his head. "No, Grace did. A long time ago, remember? She drew it before she went to heaven. She knew what the farm wanted to be, even back then." Looking at the faded drawing, I realized Grace had seen this moment coming long before my 40 days began. She'd known that love would eventually win, that the farm would fulfill its true purpose, that hearts of gold would shine once the rocks were cleared away. On the 40th day, I woke before dawn and walked the grounds of what we now called Grace's garden. The morning air was thick with possibility, and for the first time since my transformation began, I felt completely at peace. As the sun rose, people gathered in the converted barn, not just our community, but folks who'd heard about our sanctuary from miles around. Ben stood beside me at the pulpit, baby Grace sleeping in his arms. The Petersons filled the front row, Tommy clutching his giraffe with unusual solemnity. 40 days ago I began, Jesus gave me a second chance and a warning. He showed me how the Antichrist would rise by exploiting our fears, our divisions, our willingness to choose hatred over love. But he also showed me the answer. I held up Grace's old Bible, its pages still marked with rainbow sticky notes. My daughter knew it. Linda never forgot it. Tommy reminds me every day, the answer is love, not the easy kind that comes when everything's perfect, but the kind that persists through darkness, that reaches across divides, that sees gold under dirt. Looking out at the diverse faces before me, I continued, this farm isn't just a sanctuary from what's coming. It's a training ground. Every meal shared, every hand held, every difference embraced, its practice for the resistance love offers to darkness. Tommy stood up suddenly. "Grace wants me to tell you something," he announced with childlike certainty. "She says love isn't just feelings, it's like building muscles. You have to practice every day, especially when it's hard." A murmur of agreement rippled through the congregation. These people had seen love's power firsthand in the storm's aftermath, in Linda's forgiveness, in our community's transformation. The darkness is coming, I acknowledge, but we're ready now. Not because we're strong, but because we're learning to love like Jesus does, completely, persistently, without counting the cost. That's what these 40 days taught me. Sarah came forward with the latest drawing. Tommy had made a picture of our community with golden hearts shining so bright they pushed away shadows. "This is our future," she said, her voice strong. "Not just surviving what's coming, but showing others how to shine." Richard Whitaker stood up from his seat. "Harper's right," he declared. "I spent my life building walls with money and power. But love broke through anyway. That's what the Antichrist won't understand. You can't fight love with fear when people aren't afraid anymore." As if on cue, baby Grace woke and began to coo. A shaft of sunlight broke through the windows, creating a rainbow around her just like it used to do with her namesake. Tommy gasped in delight. "Look," he exclaimed. "Grace and Grandma Linda are here. They're smiling." Whether anyone else saw what Tommy saw didn't matter. We all felt it, the presence of love that transcended death, that connected past to future, that made our little farm a beacon of hope in a darkening world. The 40 days are complete, I concluded, but our work is just beginning. Every person who finds shelter here, every heart that learns to shine, every act of love that defies darkness, it's all part of Grace's legacy. She saw this coming long ago, drew pictures of what we'd become, prepared the way with her prayers and her faith. The congregation stood as one, joining hands across old boundaries that no longer mattered. As we sang Grace's favorite hymn, I looked out at what love had built, a community ready to face whatever came next, armed with the strongest weapon of all hearts that knew how to love in the face of fear. Tommy tugged at my sleeve. "Grace says to tell you she's proud of you, Grandpa Harper. She says your heart is shining so bright now, Jesus can see it from heaven." Outside, the summer sun painted everything in gold: the gardens where food was grown for anyone in need, the rooms where strangers became family, the fields where children of all colors played together. Linda and Grace's graves were visible from the barn's window, their headstones catching the light like beacons. 40 days had changed everything, but really it had just revealed what was there all along: hearts of gold under the dirt, love stronger than fear, and a little girl's faith that proved bigger than all the darkness in the world. The end was just the beginning, and love would light the way forward. Dear friends, if this story of redemption, love, and transformation touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and we'd love to hear how Grace's message resonates with you. Support our mission of spreading hope by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with loved ones who might need to hear that love can transform even the hardest hearts. Every like, share, and comment helps us reach more souls searching for light in the darkness. Together, we can build a community as strong as Grace's garden.